Hey, I'm Kev and I'm a British IndyCar fan. That means I always walk left everywhere. Right-hand turns can be difficult at first, but they turn out to be easy to overcome in the end. I am also compared to my show-off cousin all the time. People think we are similar, but we really ain't. I also have lots of friends to talk IndyCar to here as well. I also like long walks on the beach and the smell of freshly cut grass and flowers. If you like my profile, don't forget to get in touch. Goodbye. Hey, I'm Kev Kiermaska and welcome to Power Oversteer, and in today's episode we are looking ahead to a championship which returns this weekend. It's been 5.5 months since the 2013 IndyCar Series season ended in California, but it returns on the streets of St Petersburg in Florida, and so consider this your guide to the 2014 IndyCar Series season. So before I go into the 2014 season, some of you might be wondering, what the hell is the IndyCar Series? It's not on my roof, by the way. The IndyCar Series is the premier American open wheel racing series. It has a road to Indy towards it. You have USF 2000, Pro Mazda, Indy Lights, IndyCar. An IndyCar Series started in '96. It was sanctioned by IndyCar, founded in 1994 by Tony George and a few disgruntled members of the Kart Championship. You see, Kart was formed in 1979 by the team owners who were kind of unhappy with USAC, who was running kind of American open wheel racing before then. And so Kart started in 1979, and it kind of had an unhappy marriage, or tried to get along with USAC, because USAC was still organising the big one, the Indianapolis 500. And then in 1995, IndyCar split from Kart. And so we had two series at the top of American open wheel racing, IndyCar and Kart. And the IndyCar Series started on the 27th of January 1996 on an oval in Disney World, Florida. Yep, that Disney World, Florida. Buzz Calkins, I was going to say, you say it, won the opening race. And this was a series that was oval only. It was a cheaper formula for some of the team owners who were part of Kart, who were going into the red, because Kart were kind of having an arms race, especially on the engine side. It was getting very expensive for these team owners, and so IndyCar was kind of a cheaper alternative. They had turbo engines, they had a nice chassis from the likes of Reynard. And the first championship had 4 races, run in 96 and 97, and it was co-won by Scott Sharp and Buddy Lazier, who won the big one, the Indianapolis 500. And Kart continued on its way with its international array and cast at drivers of teams and manufacturers, and being on ovals and road and street courses as well. And then in the early thousands, some of these car owners wanted to be in the big one, the Indy 500. And so in 2000, Chip Ganassi came over and he promptly won the Indy 500 with Juan Pablo Montoya. And then Penske came over and he won it with the likes of Gil de Ferran and Heyo Castroneves. And then they came over into the IndyCar Series Championship along with the likes of Andretti Green, as they were known then. And so Kart was losing some of its teams to IndyCar. And car was having problems of its own with the high costs of the championship and not that greatest organisation at the top. But it still did have the likes of Newman Haas and Forsyth Racing in its series fighting at the top. And IndyCar had now Penske, Chip Ganassi and Andretti at the top. And then in 2005, the IndyCar Series started introducing road and street courses such as St Petersburg, where the opening race of this season is this weekend. However, IndyCar was losing manufacturers in the mid-thousands. It had Chevrolet and Honda as engine suppliers along with Toyota. In the end, Honda was the only one left after they left in 2005, Chevrolet and Honda, or Toyota I mean. And on the chassis side you had Reynard and Panos along with Dallara, who came in the early thousands. But then quickly Panos and Reynard left in the mid-thousands, and so we only had Dallara and Honda supplying the engines and chassis for the teams in the late thousands to early part of this decade. Meanwhile, kart became Champ Car in 2003, if I remember correctly. And Champ Car was losing money though. There wasn't many eyes on the championship. It was dominated by the Sebastian Bourdais guy from France and Newman Haas. Bourdais went to F1 in 2008, and Champ Car left the American open world scene then. It dissolved in 2008. It had its last race at Long Beach in 2008, and it became part of IndyCar. It was kind of unified at the top now after 12 years apart. Everyone was happy, kind of. You see, Tony George had kind of upset his family, who were the board, who owned Indianapolis. The Holman, George board, they sacked their son Tony George in 2009. So in came Randy Bernard in 2010 to run the series. He was a guy who'd run the bull riding championship, I think, for a number of years. But he brought fresh ideas to the table. He brought the idea of a new formula as well that he wanted for IndyCar starting in 2012. And so he set up the iconic committee to choose a new chassis supplier and come up with a new formula. And that's the formula we see in IndyCar now. They also chose Over Swift, who supplied Formula Nippon with their car in the mid thousands, late thousands, and early part of this decade. They chose Dallara once again to give the spec chassis of this car. But they also wanted to put body kits on this car and now have a wide array of manufacturers providing body kits, so different aero devices over the car, and help them make them look a bit different as well. Unfortunately, that hasn't come along because of disgruntled team owners, and that meant Randy Bernard was gone by the end of 2012. So Mark Miles, the kind of chairman of the Human George board, is now running the series. You also still have some of the old teams from Champ Car here, just with different names, and some of the old IndyCar teams as well. Of course, you still have Penske, Chip Ganassi and Andretti, and they're kind of the top three teams in the championship. And they're all driving this thing. Some people will still call it a thing. It's the DW12. It's the Dallara car with the Dallara bodywork or body kit, and it's got a turbo engine in the back, a 2.2 litre direct injection engine V6, and in 2012 Chevrolet had a twin turbocharger on it, Honda had a single turbocharger on it, and Lotus had a brick, I think, in the back. The less we say about the Lotus involvement in IndyCar, I think the better. And the DW12 car, it's a looker, isn't it? See, there was the oval version of the car that they unveiled in 2011. There's meant to be two versions. There was meant to be a kind of road and street course version as well, with flatter side pods and just generally nicer aesthetic. Unfortunately, that was scrapped in favour of the oval one because it was cheaper then. And this formula was meant to be cheaper. Unfortunately, it's been a bit more expensive than the old formula, and that's why body kits have kind of been delayed as well, as team owners have been disgruntled at the price of this kind of new formula. Unfortunately, it's seen a couple of teams go away from the championship as well. And it's called the DW12 because it was introduced in 2012, and DW after the late Dan Wheldon. Wheldon won the 2005 Indy 500 and the 2005 IndyCar Championship and the 2011 Indy 500 in an improbable finish. And he had helped develop the car from the beginnings because he was only a part-time driver in 2011. And so he gave the car its kind of first outing, and he was helping develop the car as well. Unfortunately, that came to an end on the 16th of October 2011, the last race of the old IndyCar formula. You see, at Las Vegas there was a horrendous crash, and unfortunately Wheldon died in that crash. And so he's left this, the DW12, one of the safest cars around, even safer than an F1 car. You see, the car is a bit wider than an F1 car because that's a race on ovals. It needs that side impact as well as the rear and front crash structures as well, because you can crash these things at over 200 miles per hour. And so the underfall, the under tray is a bit wider, and it also covers a bit of the front wheels to help wheels not touch and interlock there. That's kind of worked out. Unfortunately, the rear bumpers at the end, they help prevent wheels being locked, but they haven't stopped it, sadly. But it is a much better state than it used to be, at least, because in the old formula, particularly in the late thousands, there were kind of fuel mileage races, so cars were going a bit slower than other cars, and when another car came to the back of another car, especially on ovals, it could result in the other car going over the top of it. And so that is IndyCar at the moment. We have Honda and Chevrolet supplying the engine, they are playing the chassis, and the body kit as well for that car. The tyres are supplied by Firestone. They signed a new deal at the late 2012 to supply tyres until 2018, and Dallara is providing this car until at least 2016. And so we don't really know the future of IndyCar after 2016, but it could be a very interesting one nonetheless. So this is IndyCar. They also race on ovals, including the big one, the Indy 500, street courses such as St Petersburg, and on the road courses as well. You've got the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course and Sonoma and Barber Motorsports Park as well. And the IndyCar races are a bit different than Formula 1 races. You see, Formula 1 has been nicking from IndyCar all these years. They stole the safety car format, which was introduced in, or first used in 1993, at least officially, in F1. They also stole the two tyre compound rule, which was in kind of Champ Car, and in IndyCar they even painted the sidewalls to differentiate the different compounds, which F1 of course now has. And IndyCar racing had refueling as well, which F1 introduced in '94, properly reintroduced in '94 until of course it went away in 2009. And so IndyCar races are kind of a mix of strategy as well as just all out aggression on the track. You see, with these new cars, it's easy to follow someone, or easier to follow someone on ovals especially, and go past. You see, the old car on ovals was pack racing. That was a NASCAR thing. It's a bit less safe in open wheelers. And so with these new cars, they're a bit more spread out on the ovals and a bit easier to drive on the road and street courses. You see, the Dallara chassis of old was meant to be only on ovals. It was introduced in the early thousands when the IndyCar Series was just an oval series. And so these cars are nice to drive on the road and street courses at least, and the drivers can be a bit aggressive with them, especially with these kind of bumpers at the back. You can do some rubbing is racing. I know it's not particularly favourable, at least on the street courses where cautions upon cautions can happen. And then that's where strategy comes in. And depending on when the caution falls, you can change your race on a dime. You can come from the back of the grid to be a contender for the victory. You've seen it on many street courses, especially in recent years. And so IndyCar is in a very good state heading into 2014. It has kind of a settled formula. Team owners aren't too disgruntled. And the schedule is only 5 months long after a 5.5 month break, which means there could be up to a 7-month break after the season. But that's something to talk about for IndyCar 2014 though. So the 2014 IndyCar Series schedule. It's a bit different than the 2013 one. For instance, it has 18 rounds this season compared to 19 last year, and that's held over 15 race weekends because just like last year there are 3 double headers around Detroit, Houston and Toronto. And double headers means there's 2 races in a race weekend, one on Saturday, a full length one, and one full length one on Sunday as well. And last year there were quite a lot of street courses on the schedule, but this year it's a bit more of an even mix. There are 6 oval courses, 5 street courses and 4 road courses. Last year there was the Grand Prix of Baltimore held on the streets of Baltimore. It went on for a few years but is off the calendar this year due to scheduling arrangements. College football is very big in America. And also they went to Brazil last year for a few years as well before that, to Sao Paulo for a street course there. Had one of the most thrilling finishes last year. James Hinchcliffe passed Kumasato in the final corner of the final lap to win the race. But unfortunately, due to just funding, it seems that that's off the schedule as well this year. But there is one addition to this year's calendar. But before we get into that, let's talk about the calendar as a whole. So, as I said, we start at St Petersburg this weekend in Florida for the Grand Prix of St Petersburg. It's the hometown of the late Dan Weldon, and part of the course goes past Dan Weldon Way, named after him. And then it goes to the other side of the country for another street course, perhaps the most famous one on the schedule, the streets of Long Beach in California. That Long Beach, the one that Bernie wants in a couple of years. And then a couple of weeks later, at the end of April, we go to the first road course on the schedule, the Barber Motorsports Park in Alabama. Quite a picturesque circuit as well. And then it's the month of May, the big month on the schedule, because it has the big race, the Indy 500, on the 25th of May. However, a couple weeks before that, it's the new addition on the calendar, the Grand Prix of Indianapolis, held on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course. And this road course is a bit different than the one F1 ran on from 2000 to 2007. This road course is ran clockwise, unlike the F1 one, which they ran anti-clockwise. And this road course is a bit like the MotoGP one as well, which MotoGP also ran clockwise. It has a bit of a chicane at the beginning, and it doesn't have the squiggly bit in the middle that F1 did have. And then, as I said, it's the Indy 500 on the 25th of May, and then a week later, in a packed schedule for May, it's the first doubleheader of the season, held on the Bel Air circuit in Detroit. And then a week after that, it's back to the ovals for the Firestone 600, held on the Texas Motor Speedway in Texas. This is up from the Firestone 550 in 2013, so they've added 50 extra miles to the race distance. Also, you might recognise the Texas Motor Speedway owner, Eddie Gorzage. He was complaining about the Austin race for F1 in, I believe, November, I think, which clashes with his NASCAR race held on his track. And then a week or 3 weeks after the Firestone 600, you have the second doubleheader held on the Reliant Park street / car park course in Texas, in Houston. And I say car park course because the Reliant Park car park belongs to the Reliant Stadium, which hosts the Houston Texans of the NFL. And then a week after that, we have the second of the Triple Crown races. The Triple Crown has the 500-mile races in it, the Indy 500, the Pocono 500 at the beginning of July, and the season finale on the Saturday, the 30th of August, the MAV TV 500, held in Fontana. And as you might guess from the Pocono IndyCar 500 run on the Pocono Raceway in Pennsylvania, it's run on a triangle, a bit of a different oval. And then a week after that, we are at the Iowa Speedway, another oval in Iowa, for the Iowa Indy 300. Again, this is up from the 2013 distance. It runs 300 laps this year compared to 225 last year. And then a week after that, we're going up to Canada, to Toronto and Exhibition Place for their street race there. Again, it's the final double header of the season. And then a couple of weeks after that, at the beginning of August, and the quick run to the finish for the schedule. It's back to a road course, the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, which has been a staple of American racing since the 70s. And then a couple of weeks after that, it's to an oval and another staple of American racing, the Milwaukee Mile in Wisconsin. And then it's off to the final road course of the season and the penultimate round of the season a week later at the Sonoma Raceway in Sonoma, California, for the Grand Prix of Sonoma. And then on the Saturday, the 30th of August, the MAV TV 500 IndyCar World Championships held in the Autocove Speedway in Fontana, California. So that is the schedule. It's a bit slimmer than last year, a bit more compact as well. It's only 5 months long, for goodness sake, after a 5.5 month wait as well, and it could be a 7-month wait from the end of the 2014 schedule to the beginning of the 2015 one. But Mark Miles is a man with a plan. He hopes to have a kind of winter international series to help, fill that void in the off-season months. Except we still don't know if that's going to go ahead. Hopefully it does though. So that is the schedule. Let's now talk about the teams and drivers. So let's talk about the teams and drivers of the IndyCar Series. There's 11 teams confirmed for this season, with one suing the series and another team. But that's down from last season where we had 15 teams. But maybe one of those teams will be running at the Indy 500, the team that ran Buddy Lazier, his home team, his family team as well. So he might be appearing at the Indy 500. And Dragon Racing, who ran Sebastian Bourdais and Sebastian Saveja last year, where they're concentrating on their efforts with Formula E. They might be at the 500, you never know though. And then there's Panther and Giant Reinbold Racing, which ran all your Serbia until the Indy 500 last year when they ran out of sponsorship. They still ran out of sponsorship, it seems. And then the big absentee this season, and the team that are suing the series, and Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. Panther Racing, run by John Barnes, quite a decisive figure. He's not that much liked, I would say, in the series, especially as he's suing the series and, as I said, the rival Rahal Letterman Lanigan team, because he lost his National Guard sponsorship to them. I don't see how suing is going to help, but it doesn't appear his team will be running, at least for the meantime. And so IndyCar is left with 11 teams compared to 15 last season. But these 11 teams have quite a lot of winners in them. In fact, I would say over 2/3 of the field have won an IndyCar race, which is pretty impressive, I would say. So I'm going to go through alphabetical order and then at the end I might explain who's at the top and what to expect from the Grand Prix of St Petersburg this weekend. So let's start with AJ Foyt Enterprises, and this is a team run by the legendary AJ Foyt, 4-time Indy 500 winner and multiple champion as well. I think 7 times he's won a USAC championship, and he runs in the 14 car Takuma Sato, everyone's favourite Sato. He won a race last year at Long Beach and didn't do much else. However, he was leading the championship going into the Indy 500, and he almost won the Indy 500 in 2012 until he tried to move on Dario Franchitti into the first turn and spun. I think that's Sato's career summed up in a nutshell. He is fast but spins. He's joined by Martin Plowman for the Indianapolis Grand Prix, or Grand Prix of Indianapolis, and the Indy 500. Martin Plowman's been racing in sports cars in the American Le Mans Series and the World Endurance Championship in NMP2. He also ran a couple of races in IndyCar as well a few years back. He's also a champion as well. And then we go on to one of the big teams in the series, Andretti Autosport. You might know them as a team that's going into Formula E, but they are the new guys who are heading up the Honda program. They replaced Chip Ganassi, who has switched from Honda Power to Chevrolet, and he's got a big team, Andretti Autosport. Let's start with Michael Andretti, who runs the Andretti Autosport teams. His son, Marco Andretti. Marco Andretti had a breakout year last year. He finished 5th in the championship. He was consistent, but he didn't win a race. Hopefully he wins one this year. And he is 3rd in line, of course, in the Andretti lineage. You had Mario, you had Michael and John, now you got Marco. And alongside him is going to be James Hinchcliffe, everyone's favourite mayor of Hinchtown. He's Canadian. He won 3 races last year, his first 3 races in IndyCar, and he finished in the top 10 in the standings, but was a bit inconsistent. Hopefully he can add some consistency this year. But he's one of the best guys for the series because he's very marketable and very camera friendly, and he's great interview as well. And then alongside him you have Ryan Hunter-Reay, the 2012 IndyCar champion. American driver. You wouldn't have guessed it in 2013 because no one heard that he was an American champion of an American series, unfortunately. But he is perhaps one of the best drivers on the grid. He drove as well as anyone in 2013. He just didn't have the luck in the second half of the season. Hope that comes through this year though for him. And then we have a new kid on the block, a young fiery Colombian. Tell me if you've heard that before. Carlos Munoz. He ran in Indy Lights last year, just missed out on the title to Sage Karam. And he also just missed out on an Indy 500 win in his opening IndyCar start. He was 2nd to Tony Kanaan and started 2nd on the grid as well. So he's quite a good, fast young driver. He crashed a bit as well in Fontana, so it might be an up and down year for him. We're also going to see a surprising face at Andretti Autosport this season as well. Kurt Busch is going to drive the Indy 500. He might not mean anything over here in Britain, but he means a lot in America. He's a NASCAR driver. He's been a NASCAR Sprint Car champion. He's also known as an outlaw. He's known for being a bit brash, being a bit aggressive. But he's also calmed down a bit in recent years. And he's also going to try the double, because the Indianapolis 500 runs on the same day as the Monaco Grand Prix for F1, and the Coca-Cola 600 for NASCAR held at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. So he's going to run the Indy 500, get on a helicopter, then try and run the 600 miles of the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Good luck to the guy. He's the first guy to try the double in over a decade. And then we have Brian Herter Autosport. And they only have 1 driver this year. Last year they had 3. They had Alex Tagliani, a veteran Canadian driver, but he was sacked and then they had ElusiveKev and JR Hildebrand in their seat. You might know ElusiveKev as a runner-up in GP2, and you might know JR Hildebrand as that guy who crashed in the last corner of the 2011 Indy 500. But they've got none of those drivers this year. They've got a young Briton rookie in their seat. He won at St Petersburg in 2012 in Indy Lights, well, in Pro Mazda, and in last year in Indy Lights. It's Jack Hawksworth. You never know, he might be a big name. He was a bit rough around the edges last year. He wasn't quite in the title hunt in Indy Lights, but he's definitely got some pace in him. And then we go to the second biggest team perhaps on the IndyCar grid, and Chip Ganassi won't be happy hearing that. Chip Ganassi Racing. They have the reigning champion in Scott Dixon, the 2013 champion, 2008 champion, 2008 Indy 500 champion, and 2003 champion as well. So I've already put a bet on him winning in 2018. But can he successfully defend the title? Someone hasn't done that since the days of Dayo at the turn of this decade. And so Scott Dixon, he's a cool, calm Kiwi. He's always consistent. He has 33 wins, the most of anyone on this grid, and he's in the top 10 on the all-time winners list. And then you got alongside him the reigning Indy 500 champion Tony Kanaan in the 10 car, who replaces the aforementioned Dayo Franchitti, a 4-time IndyCar champion and 3-time Indy 500 champion, who sadly had to retire at the end of last year after a horrendous crash in the Grand Prix of Houston. And so Tony Kanaan, he's replacing that, he's taken that seat for a year at least. It's an unusual appointment because everyone loves Tony Kanaan. Not everyone loves Chip Ganassi Racing, but he's an old veteran. He won the 2004 championship with Andretti, and I'm sure Kanaan will perhaps have to fit in with the chemistry, he'll learn that, but I'm sure he'll fit in fine. He's a fine driver. And then in the other full-time seat we have Ryan Briscoe. He's an Aussie. He was a Toyota disc driver in the mid-thousands. He's also been with Chip Ganassi before in the mid-thousands as well. He returned to Chip Ganassi last year for the Indy 500. He was at Penske before that, almost won the 2009 championship until he hit a cone in the pit lane in Trent-Montegui. And he's a guy who's never really kind of lived up to expectations apart from that 1 year, I would say. But he's a consistent performer. Chip Ganassi loves him, and I'm sure he'd be a nice third string car behind the other two. And then there's another Chip Ganassi car, but kind of different sponsorship, so I'm not sure if it counts as a Chip Ganassi car. It's Charlie Kimball. He was in Europe in the mid-thousands or late thousands, and then he kind of struggled, found out he had diabetes, came to America and kind of rebuilt his career in America. He was in Indy Lights for a few years, then he stepped up to IndyCar in 2011. He was that car that JR Hildebrand passed before he hit the wall on that last lap. But he's not much better than that now. Last year he won a race at Mid-Ohio, finished 9th in the standings. And so Charlie Kimball was maybe someone to look for to get another win under his belt in 2014. Then we go to kind of one of the smaller teams on the grid, Delcoin Racing. And he has Justin Wilson, the Briton, in his seat. You might remember Wilson as an F3000 champion in the early thousands, and he also drove for Minardi and Jaguar. And then he came to America and he was runner-up in Champ Car in the Bourdais years, and then he's been driving for Delcoin, Newman Haas, and driving Rybold Racing. Not all these big teams in IndyCar, but he's been winning in them. He got Delcoin's first win at Watkins Glens in the late thousands, and then he got another win for Delcoin on an oval in Texas in 2012. So Justin Wilson's one of the top drivers in this field, and he finished in 6th place in the standings last year, which with Delcoin Racing is just amazing. So maybe look out for Wilson to be especially strong on those road and street courses. Alongside him, well, I've got TBA on my sheet, but he's now been confirmed as Carlos Huertas. Again, he's someone who's come from Europe to America. I think he was in Formula Renault 3.5, but now he's in an IndyCar this season. Last season he did win a race in Formula Renault 3.5 as well, but it's a big adjustment to go from that car to an IndyCar, and especially to ovals as well. So maybe look to him to just learn from Justin Wilson this season. Then we've got Ed Carpenter Racing, the only driver-ran team. See, Ed Carpenter is one of the few oval specialists on the grid, and he's going to be running his team as well. But he's only going to be running the ovals this year. You've seen seasons past, Ed's been trying to run the road and street courses, but has not been that successful at them. So he's hired Mike Conway to run those road and street courses. He's a Briton, he was a Honda test driver, won in GP2 before he came to America. Then he won at Long Beach with Andretti, and then he hasn't done much since, until 2013. He was with Dale Coyne for a couple of races and won in Detroit and got a podium as well. And so he's always handy on the road and street courses, and is a guy who's never vowed to race on an oval again after the end of the 2012 season, because he had a couple of horrific accidents in the Indy 500. And so maybe look for Mike Conway to always contend on the road and street side, and for Ed Carpenter to always contend on the oval side. That's a very strong pairing for Ed, and hopefully it gets him into the top 22 and kind of the team circus and get the team money which the IndyCar Series hands out to the teams at the end of this season. And then we go to KV Racing Technology, an old champ car team and owned by Jimmy Vasser, 1996 car champion, and also Kevin Cahoven, who is part of the Ford board, if I remember correctly. And so they have Chevrolet power, and they have Sebastian Bourdais. You might remember him at Toro Rosso, beaten by that other Sebastian. But he's a four-time champion, a four-time champ car champion from 2004 to 2007. Yes, it didn't work out with Toro Rosso, but he's won in almost everything else. He's won the 24 hours of Daytona, the 12 hours of Sebring. Not the 24 hours of Le Mans, his home race. He's been runner-up though with Peugeot. And so Bourdais, he's one of the top drivers in this field as well. And last year he showed with Dragon Racing he can still fight it at the front. Maybe in the better team, we'll see him at the front a bit more this season. Alongside him is his teammate from last year at Dragon, Sebastian Cerveja, another young Colombian. But he's no more known for his money than his driving skills. His best finish was only 8th last season, and he rarely got top 10, so don't expect much of him this season, sadly. And then we have Rahul at Mananagan Racing. That Rahul part is Bobby Rahul, 1986 Indy 500 winner and double car champion. And that Letterman part is David Letterman, the late night talk show host in America. The Lanigan part is Mike Lanigan, who bought into Newman Haas Racing in the thousands as well, and has been around IndyCar for quite a long time now. And there's another Rahul also in the team, Graham Rahul, the son of Bobby Rahul, winner, or youngest winner, I believe, in IndyCar still, at St Petersburg in 2008 in his debut race in IndyCar as a teenager. He hasn't quite lived up to that promise since, hasn't won a race since, and we kind of expect more than him. He kind of struggled last year, which was a bit sad to see, but hopefully he's a bit stronger this season. Alongside him for at least round 2 from Long Beach to the Indy 500 is Oriol Serbia, a veteran Spanish driver. I think he's won a race in kart, never in IndyCar, but he's kind of the Nick Heidfeld of IndyCar. You don't notice him, but he's always up there. He's always getting a top 10, which in this series is very good indeed. And so he could be a very handy, experienced guy alongside Graham Rahul. He might be the experienced guy alongside Rahul that Rahul needs to hopefully lift up his game. Then we have Sarah Fisher Hartman racing with Joseph Newgarden, young American talent, fast young American talent as well. He was Indy Lights champion in 2012, if I got that correct. No, 2011 I believe. But he's been with Sir Fisher Hartman racing for a couple of years now. 2012, his rookie year, he wasn't very good. He was still learning, and he's on a single car team, which is very difficult to learn, as a rookie. Just ask Simona Di Silvestro, the old KV Racing HVM driver, now Sauber F1 affiliate driver, all about that, as she was a single car driver with HVM for a few years before she went to KV Racing last year. But back to Newgarden. He got a podium in Baltimore, his only podium in IndyCar. He got top fives on ovals, on street courses, and he's also quite strong on road courses as well. He is a talent. He's a personality as well. He's probably one of the most multiple guys on the grid, along with James Hinchcliffe. He's someone that IndyCar could help bring IndyCar exposure in the future. He just needs to improve as a driver and get the results, and he definitely is improving. Hopefully the results will come in 2014, as he showed a bit in 2013 as well. And then we have St Petersburg Hamilton Motorsports, and he has Simon Pagenaud, the Frenchman. Probably the guy I most respect as a driver on the grid. He can drive anything, and he was third in the championship last year in quite a small team. He was fifth in his rookie year in 2012 in quite a small team, and the only way up is perhaps first in 2014, and I wouldn't bet against him getting that. Pagenaud, he's raced with Peugeot at Le Mans. He raced in the American Le Mans Series and won a championship as well. And so this guy, he also ran in Champ Car alongside Will Power, is a very strong driver and someone I expect to contend this season. Perhaps needs to be a touch stronger on the ovals, but on the road and street courses, very few are better than him. And he's got alongside him Mikhail Elishkin, another guy from Europe coming to America. He was the 2010 Formula Renault 3.5 champion, and then unsuccessfully got up to GP2 for a few races, then came back down to Formula Renault 3.5. He's been in Formula Renault 3.5 since, including last year. Wasn't that great in the standings, sadly. Hopefully fresh surroundings, fresh challenge for him. He'll bring out the Elishkin of old, who proved himself, as I said, in 2010 Formula Renault 3.5. He's also the first Russian to race in the IndyCar Series. And it's going to be a tough year learning ovals and bumpy street courses and these new cars, but he's got a great teacher in Simon Pagenaud. And at the Indy 500, in the 5 car, St Petersburg Hamilton Motorsports have a familiar face to all. He's more known for his outspoken opinions of F1 recently than his driving, but Jack Villeneuve is going to be driving in the Indy 500, the 1995 Indy 500 and kart champion, 97 Formula 1 world champion, 2006 pushed out of F1, and in recent years we've seen driving in NASCAR, V8 supercars, the Andros Trophy, the ice racing championship in France, and now he's been driving full-time in the World Rallycross Championship in 2014, alongside his duties as a commentator in France, I believe, on F1, like he was last year, and of course the 500 with St Petersburg Hamilton Motorsports. I don't really expect much of Villeneuve. This is a very different time from 19 years ago when he last drove in the 500, and this will be the biggest gap between a driver attempting the 500, and so it could be a difficult time for Villeneuve, but I kind of hope he does well. And then the final team on the grid, Team Penske. We have Helio Castroneves, the runner-up in 2013. He's been the runner-up in championship before as well, but he's won 3 Indy 500s. That championship is the one thing missing from his resume, and he was so close last year. Maybe he can get it this year. But he's got to watch out for his teammate Will Power, who won the last 2 races last season and got his most satisfying win on the oval in Fontana. He's an Aussie, he's been in America for quite a few years, he's been driving for Penske quite a few years, and he's been known as the bridesmaids of the IndyCar Series. He's finished runner-up 3 times to Ryan Hunter-Reay and Dario Franchitti. And so maybe 2014 can finally be his year after finishing 4th in the championship in 2013. And it's quite scary for the opposition now that he can drive on ovals, as long as road and street courses where he's perhaps the fastest driver on them. And there's a new addition to the Penske team this season. In the number 2 car, which was occasionally ran by AJ Allmendinger last year, who was a former Champ Car driver and drives in NASCAR in America. That was only part-time. It's going to be full-time this season with Juan Pablo Montoya in the seat. Yeah, that's 4 Colombians on the grid, almost a fifth of the grid if I got that right off the top of my head. But we all know about him. 2000 Indy 500 champion, 99 kart champion, won the F3000 series in the late 90s as well. Drove for Williams and McLaren in F1, won the Monaco Grand Prix in 2003, won a couple of races in NASCAR as well. Was in the chase in 2009, had his best season in NASCAR, but it didn't work out with Chip Ganassi in the end in that series, and so he switched over to the dark side Penske for 2014, and that is perhaps the best driver lineup on the grid. Castroneves, Montoya and Power. It's going to be hard to beat, but that's what the other 10 teams are going to try and do, and that is the runners and riders for the 2014 IndyCar Series season. So that is the 2014 IndyCar Series, and I didn't even talk about a couple of other things, like the horsepower for the cars have gone up by 50 horsepower. It's been estimated from 700 to 750, so a bit more power for the drivers to control, which they've been kind of asking for as well since these new formula have been introduced in 2012. And also a new title sponsorship for the series, perhaps the most important announcement of the off-season. It's now called the Verizon IndyCar Series. They signed up for a 10-year, $100 million deal. And they've already done so much for the series as well. They mainly sponsored Penske and Will Power, and they'll be sponsoring Juan Pablo Montoya for a few races this season. And they are a phone company and they have an IndyCar app, and you know, hopefully it brings more exposure to the series, get some more eyeballs on the TV as well when the races are on, because IndyCar badly needs that. Before that, IndyCar was known as the IZOD IndyCar Series from 2010 2013. They had a 5-year deal but cut it short by a year, and frankly IZOD didn't do that much for the series. I feel they are a clothing company, quite an old clothing company as well. I think many people didn't realise it was still around when IndyCar announced that title sponsorship. But hopefully this is a new era for the IndyCar Series. As I said, new title sponsor, more powerful engines, you know, new drivers as well, exciting drivers as well, with the returning of old and some great youthful drivers. And perhaps we're seeing present day Montoya and Montoya from when he was in IndyCar and kart those years ago, 15 years ago, with Carlos Munoz even. And so it should be an exciting year for the IndyCar Series and build upon a brilliant 2013 season and a great 2012 one as well, after the dark days of 2011 and especially how that season ended. And so I really do hope you've learned a lot about IndyCar if you haven't heard about it before, and you enjoyed learning about the history and learning about the cars and the way it works in IndyCar, and learning about the teams and drivers and all the schedule and all the races they have. This is why I love the IndyCar Series, the variety that it has. You have a variety of winners and different contenders each weekend, as I said, any given Sunday sometimes. And you also have a variety of tracks, and you see the difference between oval racing and road and street course racing. It is brilliant to watch, and that's really one thing that really did draw me to the series, that you have such this variety in racing in this series. But before I gush all over your screen here talking about the IndyCar Series, I'll be back with I think a review of St Pete and kind of a preview of the April races in the IndyCar Series, such as Long Beach and the Barber Motorsports Park at Alabama at the end of the month, which I'm really looking forward to. They are great races and always provide something. And I might be back with talking points during that month with Power Oversteer about what's happening in WRC especially, because that's got an interesting start to the season as well, and of course with F1 as well at Malaysia this weekend. And so I hope you have enjoyed this, and it's nice actually standing up for once. I don't feel lazy recording this for once, so I might start just doing it like this, just standing up, if you don't mind, and if I stand in the right positions, it's more fun this way basically as well, instead of just sitting there and reading like that. But as I said, I'll be back perhaps next week with another Power Oversteer. So out for watching. So till then, cheerio.